Greetings and salutations, good friends. I hope you're all doing very, very well here. I hope you are all staying home, staying healthy, and taking care of each other as well as others as best you can. In these trying times, it has been crazy. Things have been kooky. As someone who works retail, I can tell you, it's been crazy. But things are staying on the shelves a lot longer. We're doing good. We're almost there, if not already there. We just need to accept it. Now, with that positive note out of the way, I have a topic of conversation that has been coming up recently, or for quite some time, actually, for many people in the ways of the nerd. The Snyder Cut. Justice League, that came out a few years ago. I'm going to round it and say 3 years. As someone who's seen it only once, I can say I wasn't all that impressed with it. It had a lot of problems, had a lot of issues, a lot of things that I just could not get over. You know, pacing, few actor choices, lines, you know, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. So, but with that being said, I can't say it was terrible. I mean, it was bad, for sure. But I also view it as something that, you know, it's a window into the past. It is a moment that has long since been forgotten. You know, because things have moved on. We have moved on from it in the ways of the DCEU. So, with that being said, why is the Snyder Cut almost at myth legend right now? Myth, like, oh my god, does it exist? Will we ever see it? Will it ever come to be? I have been asked this question quite a few times when people find out how much of a nerd I am. When they ask me what did I think of the DC movies versus the Marvel movies, I say the Marvel movies have been vastly better. With a few exceptions here and there, but more often than not, all of them as part of the actual cinematic universe have been very good. The DC movies have not. What's strange to me is that between Justice League and Batman versus Superman, the best parts of those movies went on to make their own movies, which were vastly superior, which is kind of weird. Think about this. When Batman versus Superman came out, it was okay. Again, I've only seen it once, but it was okay. It was good. But one of, if not the best parts of that movie was Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. And guess what? She got her own movie, and it was frickin' awesome. By that same regard, Justice League came out, and it was okay, arguably worse than Batman versus Superman. But it introduced us to Jason Momoa's Aquaman. He got his own movie, and it was frickin' awesome. I'm not going to go into which one I like more, because, you know, that's a topic for another time. But I'll say both of these movies were absolutely incredible and, surprisingly enough, born out of movies that were subpar to okay. I mean, Batman versus Superman had a lot of problems too, but it did have a lot of good elements too. It introduced us to one of the best Batmans. Not Batman, that's like if there's multiple Batmans in one room, I would almost say that's Batmans. Batmen. I don't know. That's grammar for you. But Ben Affleck surprising the world as being a good Batman and Bruce Wayne. And yes, there is a difference. I mean, Michael Keaton is still among those who is like incredibly good at being both. Val Kilmer seemed like he was a good Bruce Wayne, but not so much of a Batman. Same for George Clooney, which is weird. But that's a topic for another day. Point is, Batman vs. Superman did have a lot of good points. One of those being Ben Affleck. I have grown up having to see him in the media, him in movies, and being one of those people saying, oh my god, this guy needs acting lessons. And lo and behold, I think either going through all these movies has done that for him, or he actually did that, because he was good. And I was so bummed to find out he wasn't going to be Batman anymore. But honestly, I'm getting off topic here, because we're talking about the Snyder Cut. Now, I've been asked myself many a time, when people find out I'm a nerd. A, do I think the Snyder Cut exists? And B, do we think we'll ever see it? And I always ask the same questions in response. Number one, do you think it exists? And two, vastly more important, does it matter? Does it matter if the Snyder Cut exists? And to be honest, no. It doesn't. I keep seeing all these things pop up on my YouTube feed, on my Google feed, on all these things. I don't click on any of them, and they just come up anyway. I guess because I click on other things that are related only in the sense of they're superhero or nerd. So these things pop up thinking, oh, you like this too, right? No. Because number one, the Snyder Cut, I really don't think exists. And number two, even if it does, we will never see it. But the biggest thing that we need to remember is that Justice League failed. It failed. And it's arguable that it's partially due to the fact, if not solely due to the fact, of changing directors midway. If you don't know, Justice League suffered from a major directorial shift. Roughly, if not more, halfway through production, Zack Snyder, the director of Batman vs. Superman, and Man of Steel, along with 300 and Watchmen, had to leave Justice League due to family reasons, which I respect too much to go into. It ain't my place. You want to find out, you go do that, but that's not what I'm talking about. Halfway through production, he left. Bear that in mind. Through production, not pre-production, not post-production, production, which means the actors have been chosen, the costumes have been made, the sets have been built, the locations have been scouted, scenes were shot and finished. Editing had begun. It's easy to say that because with, digital and all that now, it's easy to send off the finished product and have the editing begin, the special effects begin, which means the train was going. Things were getting done when Zack Snyder was the director. Then he left, and for reasons that I personally have my own theories on, Joss Whedon, director of both Avengers movies, creator of the Buffy, Angel, and Firefly TV shows, was asked to come in. And I think it's because of his involvement with the Avengers is why he was brought in. And to be fair, I really, really do not like Zack Snyder. I really, really don't. His Man of Steel was okay. Batman vs. Superman was okay. While I don't see myself going to see it again anytime soon, I am glad that I saw it. It had a lot of good moments in it. But that's the thing. Snyder is good at moments. As far as entirety of movies, not so much. As a quick tirade, I hate 300. I find it very overrated and boring. But that's neither here nor there. Halfway through, Snyder left and Whedon came on, giving us what should be considered, after all, the Whedon-Snyder cut, which means it was a collaboration, without them being aware of it, between two directors trying to make one movie. Another movie comes to mind where something similar happened. AI. It had Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick directing it. Again, two polar opposite directors trying to create the same movie. And this is based on what I currently know. I could be wrong, and I freely am okay with that. Because if I'm wrong, it means I get to learn more, and I can stop talking wrong. But with all that being said, a similar thing happened. The movie wasn't done yet, and Stanley Kubrick left the project. Kind of different, though, because he died. So Spielberg had to finish it. But there is a very big difference here. Two, in fact. One being, AI was its own movie. It was its own movie. It wasn't trying to set anything up. It wasn't part of a larger project. It was its own movie. And two, vastly more important, the two directors were aware of each other and they were working with each other. Not the same with Justice League. Whether I'm right or wrong about AI, the point is, Whedon had to come onto the project with a lot of it already done. Now, hindsight's 20/20. They could have just started from scratch. It would have been expensive, but it could have been possible and probably more profitable. Because when you get someone like Whedon and someone like Snyder, two directors who are on like either end of the, we'll just go for it, superhero spectrum, that they both have different ways of doing things. Whedon's more comedic and, I'll just say it, light. And on the other side, Snyder's more dark and dramatic. And, it's kind of like pick your choice. There's no good or bad between those two. Me, I'm definitely more on the Whedon side. I like comics to be, a little bit more bright, but also more hopeful. Snyder's have not. They're just not. But again, when you hear all these things and you see the proof before you about the projects both these directors have been brought onto and done and completed, it's very strange that they would bring on someone like Whedon to do that. But for some reason, I think it was Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is not taking or not being given any of the blame. All the blame seems to be placed on Whedon, which is garbage. It's not his fault the movie was terrible. Okay, I'm getting heated. It wasn't terrible. It just wasn't good. But it's not Whedon's fault. He was given a project that had already been halfway done. So why blame him? And here's another thing. Warner Brothers should take the full brunt of this blame, just like how Marvel and whatever other companies at the moment were doing for Age of Ultron. Avengers 2 was having similar issues. The difference being it had Whedon through the whole project. He stuck to it. Although it ended up with him pretty much leaving the internet entirely, at least at that moment. I don't know if he's come back or not, but he left Facebook and Twitter and just all these other things. As Honest Trailer said, guys, I think Whedon needs a hug. And he does. He really does. I don't blame Whedon for Justice League. If anything, I blame Warner Brothers. But, again, the Snyder Cut. Legend says that there is a version of Justice League that shows entirely, if not more so, of Snyder's vision for the movie. And it would have been so much better. Would it really have been better? Really ask yourselves this question. Would Justice League have been better if it was just Snyder all the way through? Arguably, yes, but only because it would have been one director all the way through. It would have kept the same tone through the whole film, or movie. Films are different. But that still wouldn't have made it good. Again, proof A, I'm forgetting the word. Just Batman versus Superman. Exhibit, that's the word. Exhibit B, Man of Steel. Exhibit C, 300. And Exhibit D, Watchmen. All those movies were Zack Snyder solo projects. Each and every one of them just had him. And for good or bad, those movies range from to okay, that was good. Of those movies, I personally find Watchmen to be the best. But that's only because it was its own movie. It wasn't part of a larger universe. Was something, and I don't really blame him for Man of Steel either. Man of Steel was actually pretty good. I actually like it a lot more so than Batman vs. Superman. But I think it's because I don't think it was ever considered to be part or the beginning of a larger movie series. It was either when it was done or almost done when they started to think, hey, let's start, Marvel's onto something here with this shared universe idea. Let's do that. So then they start doing their thing, bringing in Batman and all that stuff. So I think that's why Man of Steel might have been better and Batman vs. Superman was not. And then you get Justice League, which was trying to jumpstart the whole thing by bringing in all these characters all at once. And for good or bad, there you go. So, yeah. Let's talk about the good things, though, that Snyder has brought. He brought us Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and then she went on to do great things, making her own really good movie. He brought on Jason Momoa, and then he got an awesome movie too. But for good or bad, unfortunately, these guys didn't leave enough of an impact on me to seek out their names. The guy who played Cyborg and the guy who played Flash. I only remember Flash because I worked with a guy named Ezra, but I don't remember his last name. I've tried to read it, and oh my god, I can't read that. It's too much for me. And J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon I thought was a really damn good choice. So he did make good choices. But he also made bad ones that almost completely outweigh the good. And those two being Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor and bringing in Doomsday. What the hell? I could have actually been okay with Doomsday. It's a bullshit thing to bring him in, especially for Superman's second movie in this franchise. But I could have forgiven that if Jesse Eisenberg didn't exist in these movies. If that character of Lex Luthor Jr. or whatever the hell he was supposed to be, if he was the Lex Luthor from the comics, hell, even the Gene Hackman version would have been damn good. I mean, Hackman's was more hokey a little, but it was still good. He was still intimidating, and he wasn't this weird spastic cartoon of a character. So, keeping that in mind, do we think the Snyder Cut would be any better? Honestly, no. Why? Because it still would have been Snyder. It still would have had his Snyder-isms, dark, dreary, but also potentially contemplating the nature of superheroes, which I think is what he was trying to do with Batman vs. Superman, and that's what he more or less did with Watchmen. But the difference there is that Watchmen is coming from a pre-existing content, which was already asking those questions, and I think he did okay with it. But also bear this also in mind. If the Snyder Cut exists, the Snyder Cut has to include bits from the Whedon Snyder Cut. Because like I mentioned before, when Snyder left the project, it wasn't done. It was nowhere near done. A lot more work had to be completed before it was done. Which means that to fill in those gaps, you would have to see some of the Whedon stuff. So think about that part. That if you do ever see the Snyder Cut, which you won't, but if you do, you'll still have to be reminded of the Whedon Snyder version. So you can't escape it. You can't. And besides, why would you? Why are people pushing so much for a movie that doesn't mean anything? The failure of Batman vs. Superman, and I'm just going to, for argument's sake, I'm going to say from its failure, brought us Wonder Woman. From the failure of Justice League, brought us Aquaman, essentially brought us Joker, brought us Shazam, and is now bringing us Wonder Woman 2. So let the failure stand for what it was. A good jumping off point for these people to recognize, okay, clearly we can't do ensembles. We can't do this whole shared universe thing. What we can do are individual movies. Man of Steel by itself was actually pretty good. Had its problems, but it was still pretty good. But then once you get into Batman vs. Superman, if they just left it to Batman fighting Superman, it would have been better. But they had to throw in all this other stuff. Same thing for Justice League. If it just focused on one thing, it probably would have been better. I don't care about the differences between the Batman vs. Superman Steppenwolf and then the Justice League Steppenwolf. Yes, the one that what I saw in Batman vs. Superman was vastly more intimidating looking, but I somehow doubt it would have made anything better. Chances are it still would have been voiced by the same guy. He still would have had the same lines. He still would have had the same attitude. So regardless of the look, it still would have been the same thing, which probably could have been even more disappointing. I mean, you have this huge, giant, hulking thing being utterly boring and lame and flat out unintimidating. So really, and I mean this sincerely, does it matter if the Snyder Cut ever comes out? Because guess what? Even if it does come out, nothing will change. Everything will stay the same. No one's complaining about how, what could the Avengers 2 look like if Marvel didn't do the things it did, if it was just Whedon doing his thing. No one's complaining about that. At least if they did, that complaining stopped rather quickly. So I can't say I fully understand this whole desire to see the Snyder Cut. Because even if it does come out, even if we do see it, nothing changes. Aquaman still exists, Wonder Woman 2 still coming out, all these things still would be in place. So, I ask, as a fellow nerd, maybe not to your level or to others' levels, but I ask you, let it go. Just let the Snyder Cut go. Okay? Wanting something like that is irrelevant. Needless to say, there's far more important things to be thinking about and focusing on these days, But despite that, the Snyder Cut doesn't exist. And even if it does, we will never see it. And even if we do, it won't change anything. It won't. It can't. Because again, it wasn't done. The movie wasn't done. So whatever got filled in is going to either be shitty special effects or have a lot of Snyder Whedon stuff in there. So I ask, does it matter? And that's not a rhetorical question. I'm asking, does it matter? So ask yourselves that. Give me an answer. Any answer will do. I mean this sincerely. Any answer will do. Because honestly, I haven't come across anything that suggests that the Snyder Cut's existence, for good or bad, would make any difference. Would mean anything. So please, tell me. I am open. Tell me what you think. So on that note, I'll catch you on the flip side.